All right. Good evening, everyone. I think we're going to try to go ahead and get started. We want to thank you all for joining us this evening. We're thrilled to connect with you tonight from our homes as we continue to practice social distancing in the face of an incredibly challenging time. My name is Wendy Sung, and I'm the Assistant Dean for the MBA for Executives program at the Yale School of Management. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Joanne Legler, Director of Admissions, who I think you just saw. I'm not actually at SOM, but I thought it might be kind of fun to still have Evans Hall as my backdrop tonight. So it's such a lovely building, and I hope you'll have a chance to visit at some point. In the next 45 minutes or so, our goal is to really provide an update on the state of things at Yale at SOM, as well as give you a sense of what's going on with our MBA for Executives program and some of the issues that we're working on as we prepare for the class of 2022. Additionally, Joanne will walk through the admissions process and let you know how we've made accommodations in light of test center closures, along with other challenges. Finally, we're here to answer any questions that you may have, knowing that you might have quite a few at this point. And if you do have questions, please submit them through the chat function, and we'll answer them as we go, and as well, we'll save time at the very end for questions. Since we'll spend the bulk of our time tonight talking about sort of our new normal that we find ourselves in, if you would like to learn more about our program as a whole, I recommend watching a previously recorded information session. We also have some terrific recorded webinars on topics such as our areas of focus, the executive assessment, and some great panel of peers, or as we like to call it, our pop sessions with our current students. So again, I'll share with you what's going on in New Haven, what it means for the admissions process, and timeline, and also really spend the rest of your time answering any questions that you may have. So Yale, along with many other universities, have taken this pandemic seriously and have been following guidelines set out by the CDC, our national and local government, to keep our community safe and to slow the spread of the virus. Just to share with you, if you haven't already read about this, but Yale University has asked residential students not to return to campus after our spring break, which ended a week ago. And we've moved all of our classes online to a remote format. We've also closed most of our buildings, all of our libraries, and canceled all events, including reunion and commencement. All non-essential personnel are asked to work from home as well. And I'm sure this is very similar to many of the things that your organizations might have implemented. So the School of Management is doing all of that as well. And we've seen a very impressive response from our students who are not only in New Haven, but across the country, but also spread out around the globe in their strive to continue their education. Our faculty have adjusted flawlessly and very remarkably to this new format, to new tools, re-looking at the syllabus and instituting a new grading scale for this time period. And also our staff has done a heroic job of creating the infrastructure to move everything online, and also volunteering their time during the workday to monitor remote classes with our faculty and in support of our faculty. So although Evans Hall is very quiet right now, there's probably more activity occurring throughout sort of the New Haven area to support the learning experience of all of our students. Our MBA for Executives program has, I'm really thrilled to say, has transitioned extremely well and adjusted really well to our new environment. It's not one that any of us wished for, but we've been able to successfully move to all of our classes to a remote format. And I think we've been very fortunate to already have a lot of familiarity and experience because of our use of the extended classroom in our program. we also recognize that our MBA for executive students are in positions where they're most affected by the current situation. Many are on the front lines dealing with sick patients or building out hospital contingency plans. Others are working hard to manage or maintain our retirement portfolios. Yet others are dealing with, supply chain issues to help us get what we need to survive in each of our communities. Last week, we had a town hall with our students to update them on issues that are on top of their mind, such as, employment, the job market, grades, how we'll gather to celebrate important milestones like the class of 2020's commencement. All of these while, acknowledging that our EMBA students are working professionals, parents, children of older parents, and the norms of being in class has changed. I mean, I think this is the first time when I've been happy to see that the average age of our class has gone down significantly, as we get to see all the babies and young kids that have joined us in our remote classrooms and getting their first taste of a Yale education. So we continue to add timely programs and resources for our students to help them through this challenging time as well. We've added sessions with with faculty members. For example, we recently did a session with Eddie Pinker, who's one of our operations faculty member, on managing operational capacity in the healthcare system in times of uncertainty. We've also done more sort of wellness focused sessions, such as with Emma Seppala talking about the science of staying calm in times of stress. So there's a lot going on at Yale in New Haven at the School of Management and at the MBA for Executives program. But you might be asking, so what comes next? And if anyone in the audience has a crystal ball, I would love for you to send us a chat right now, because would love to talk to you about what's next and what we can expect. But at this time, in this time of uncertainty, our leadership is meeting regularly to consider how each day's updates and changes impact our plans for the upcoming class. Things we do know, and there are a few, is, all options are on the table. However, we are committed to having an in-person experience because it's really a hallmark of the Yale's MBA for Executives program. And that means we simply can't imagine starting the program without our 2-week orientation and residence. As soon as our leadership, both at the university level and the government level, deem it safe for large groups to gather, including in the classroom, we'll convene in person. But when that happens is a big unknown right now. We are still planning for July, and we hope that is what will happen. That is something that we're looking into daily. And while we're pleased that we can offer a robust remote experience to complete the current semester, we know that there's no substitute for, and our students deserve a rigorous on-campus program that encourages students to foster debate and discussion, and really create friendships and relationships with classmates, faculty, and staff that will last a lifetime. As our plans for July 2020 begins to take shape, we will provide updates in emails and on our websites, so please stay tuned. Another element of our program that hasn't changed is our mission, and that probably will never change. Any discussion of Yale SOM always includes our founding mission, which is to educate leaders for business and society. Leaders who have a strong sense of purpose. This mission drives everything we do here, and we take that very seriously. If you ask anyone at Evans Hall, what the school mission is, they will be able to rattle it off with ease. We're lucky to have alumni working in private, public, and nonprofit sectors who are making a difference in their organization while working for the greater good. So another constant is who we seek to enroll in the program. Our students are experienced leaders who are typically mid-careers, those with management and leadership experience, and where the MBA in an executive format makes the most sense. Our cohort is made up of people with a strong and demonstrated career trajectory that signals meaningful leadership potential, and people who are already taking on more responsibility within their organization. And need to build a business acumen or in line for new opportunities and wish to be prepared. Our students are also looking for acceleration and access. These are people who wish to continue to grow in their capacity and be able to further impact and make impacts on a larger scale. And wish to have the access to resources and opportunities to ensure growth and impact. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Joanne to talk a little bit more about admissions and offer a look at the profile of our first year class.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Well, back to times pre-COVID-19 when the class of 2021 joined us last July. I offer you this great picture of our class on the first day of orientation and residence last year. The class of 2021 is 74 students strong and a really great group of talented individuals with all of the hallmarks that Wendy just mentioned in terms of who we're seeking. To put a finer point on it though, you can see the profile and sort of who we're looking for when it comes down to some statistics. Generally speaking, our students have about 13 years of work experience. That's a bit of a bell curve. Certainly there are students in the program with a bit less, and definitely some with a bit more, bringing some really rich experience to the classroom discussions, we always appreciate. About 36% are women. That's a number we're always striving to increase. And in fact, in about 2 weeks, on April 16th, we'll be joining up with the Forte Foundation for an online virtual career and admissions expo for programs in the EMBA space. So if you're looking at that point to consider programs, including ours, we'll be there. Particularly great if you are maybe a year to 2 or more years out of considering a program very seriously. But we are definitely committed to increasing the number of women in our program, and we are founding sponsors of Forte, as well as executive education and EMBA sponsors of that new initiative as well. About 41% have advanced degrees. That's particularly true, of course, for our MDs, nurses, dentists, often true too for those in asset management and sustainability. We see lots of folks with different master's degrees in law, environmental science, the chemistry. It just really runs the gamut, and again, kind of adds to that texture and that layer of diversity. People come from all over, they truly do. So we can talk more about that in terms of where our students actually sort of fly in, drive in, or make the train ride in from. But also they represent a global group, and about 13 citizenships this year. That's pretty average for us. And about 37 years of age. So for talking a little bit about aging parents and being aging parents for our students and being parents themselves, they are right around that sort of sandwich age of having to care for both those older and those younger, which certainly adds to the complexity of time management. We'd be happy to answer questions about that as well. So you're wondering about our admissions process, I'm sure, particularly in light of where we are right now and knowing that it's a bit of a challenging time. So we're going to do our best to answer all the questions that we possibly can. So I would definitely encourage you to take this time to pop into the chat feature and let us know what's on your mind. We've definitely been fielding questions over email for weeks now, but particularly recently as our round 3 deadline was yesterday, and I'll talk a little bit more about that too. So maybe you're wondering, what does it take to join this group? So if you're not familiar already, I'll go ahead and just talk through the process first, and then we'll answer specific questions about what this means for the remainder of this cycle. Our admissions process has not changed, and we really do stick to a pretty, I think, streamlined process, both for you as applicants as well as us. We're very intentional about our process, and it goes through many iterations. many readers, many discussions, conversations, and committees. Our process is super holistic. We're really eager to get to know you from every possible angle, and that's what takes so much time. And that's what we do several times a year, mostly in person and now remotely. But in any case, it's fairly straightforward. We do want you to submit an application by the deadline. If you are maybe tuning in because you're thinking about applying in a future year, our deadlines tend to sort of be the same. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. When the deadline comes, as it did yesterday and into the next couple of weeks likely, we read and then we read and we read a little bit more. When we're done reading, we come together as a committee. And so we do have a team of talented professionals who spends their time looking into, like I said, each aspect of your application. We'll talk more about the components of the application in a moment as well. If you are invited, and not unfortunately everybody is, but if you're invited to come for an interview, I guess I shouldn't say come for an interview, but in the past you would have come to campus for an interview. We'll talk a bit more about how we're going to handle that remotely in a few minutes as well. You'll take part in an interview day, I guess I'll say now. And then we go back to the committee, and the interview is not for nothing. It's not for show. We really do take that pretty seriously and take that feedback into consideration for a final admissions decision. So going more specifically into the components of the application, as well as some of our deadlines, let's start with the top half first before we go too deep into talking about details like testing and round 3 right now. Regardless of round, if you haven't already applied, this might be new information. If you've already applied, of course, this is information you've known for a long time about what the components of each application are. So number 1, the resume. You probably have a resume. That's great. Time to polish it up. And we really do encourage you to think about creating a resume that is sort of Ember friendly and admissions officers eyeballs friendly. And so making it down to the very basics is helpful for us, drilling down to what makes the most sense for somebody to know who's looking at your application from this perspective. We do have 2 essays as part of the application. These are not meant to trick you in any way, really just trying to dig into your motivations for the program, your fit for one of our 3 areas of focus, and your goals for the program. We're also looking for communication skills, so being a good writer, making sure you get lots of sets of eyes on your essays to help out is always recommended. We'll talk a little bit more, but we do have a required standardized test piece of the application. At the moment, we take one of 3 exams, including the GMAT, the GRE, or the EA, also known as the Executive Assessment. It's the newest entry into this list of tests, and it's made by the folks who make the GMAT, so specifically tailored to those considering executive programs. Again, if you're new to this or we're thinking about maybe applying in a future year, definitely encourage you to hop on their website and learn more. We also have some great webinars specifically tailored to testing and the executive assessment specifically. Transcripts, that's hopefully something you have on hand, either electronically or maybe you've got an old dusty copy somewhere in your files. Go ahead, take a picture, upload that. We only need an unofficial transcript at the time of application. Should you carry on through your journey all the way to admission and enrollment, we'll be asking for more official copies at that time. For right now, a photo or a scan of what you've got on hand or can download from your alma mater's SIS would be just fine. Employer approval, this is a pretty big deal. It's important that your employer's on board given the nature and the timing of an executive MBA program. Really do encourage you to go back if this is your first time learning about the MBA at SOM and find out what our process is like and what our structure is like. But we're every other weekend, all day Friday, all day Saturday, and for travelers that might mean time on Thursday as well. So it's really important for your employer to be on board with the time that you'll be out of the office and having a frank conversation about how you'll make up that time at work and how you may have to find out who's around you to help support you through these 2 years and who you can hand off some projects to make sure that you're accommodating for your time. The application fee, that's kind of a no-brainer and easy enough to do, even though it might feel a bit painful. And then the interview, which we talked about a few minutes ago. As you can see at this point, our round 3 deadline has just come and gone. It was yesterday. What you might also notice if you were thinking about applying later than that, the application remains open at this time. So if you had planned to apply by yesterday and you got a little bit stuck on one portion and just said, forget it, never mind, take heart. We are really nice people and we're really in this particularly strange situation we all find ourselves in, very accommodating to giving you a couple of extra days if you need it. to polish up your application, put that resume together, reach out to your recommender to see if they might have time to write that letter of recommendation. If there's one piece, two pieces that you were just there and didn't get to finish up, let us know. Again, we're pretty accommodating at this point given the current situation. I'd say if you just woke up this morning and decided you wanted to do an MBA, you might want to get on the phone with one of our staff members so we can kind of walk you through that process. I don't think that's impossible at this point by any stretch, but you definitely have your work cut out for you, but we're here to help if we can. So we, like I said, plan to kind of keep that momentum going, keeping our originally scheduled deadline and scheduled interview days as well. So let's talk about testing. I have 3 sets of asterisks on this slide, and I think it's worth talking about each one. Testing. Huge bummer, right? If you were thinking about testing right up until the deadline or shortly thereafter, unfortunately, as you know, at this point, a lot of the testing centers, if not all of them at this point in the United States, have closed, making it really difficult for candidates who were considering putting that together a little bit later in the process. We're aware, we're fully aware, we've been on webinars, we've been in emails, and all the testing agencies have been doing a great job of keeping us updated on what the next steps are. I think the really good news is that number one, we will take your application at this point without a test. I don't think we'll be able to admit anybody without a test score, but we will go ahead and move through the application process from this point forward until you're able to be accommodated for a test. And the good news number 2 is that we have heard from the testing agencies that there will be online remote proctored exam options available soon-ish. The GRE has already moved into that space. The EA and the GMAT are a bit more behind. I hope to have the GMAT available for online remote proctored option in the middle of April, and the EA seems like it's just maybe a week or 2 behind. So keep yourself updated, hop on their websites, let us know if you have questions about that, but there is an option to take an exam coming soon, and we will, like I said, go ahead and move through the process pending test scores. The second set of asterisks I have here is the date or the deadline, which was our final deadline for the year. Timing is interesting. Again, we're flexible in the face of our current challenges. We will extend this deadline for those that, again, kind of got pretty close to submitting an application yesterday and couldn't quite finish it up. We probably won't take applications forever. The onboarding process to begin the program, hopefully in July, can be intense. There's pre-work, there's setting up your friends, family, your network, your cheerleaders to make sure that they're on board to successfully support you through this journey. There's work to be done, and the later we allow for applications to be submitted, evaluated, interviewed, the less time we have for onboarding. So we're very conscious of that, making sure that we're setting everybody up for success while still being really flexible and accommodating in the face of the global crisis. The third set of asterisks here is about the deadline by which we have to let you know about your final admissions decision. And so the asterisks there are more to indicate that this might not happen quite so seamlessly this year. I think anybody who produces an application and submits that yesterday up through the next couple of days to a week can reasonably expect to be accommodated on that deadline if everything is available in the application. If you are missing a test score, I think we feel pretty comfortable moving through to the next stage, which is the interview stage, but we would probably hold a final decision until we had all elements of the application in, including that test score, which again, may be remote. Don't have any indication at this point that the test centers will open up any sooner than that. So what I have been told by the testing agencies is that any preparation that you either have done or are looking into and is available to you online is great preparation for the version that will be proctored at home and online. I know you have a ton of questions about this stuff, so I'm gonna get back to that in a minute, but hopefully this is pretty clear, and these asterisks are here for a reason, and it's clear why they are. So moving forward, I'm sure folks have questions about the interview as well, and we will still move forward with interviews, just obviously in a different format, which we're excited to see how that will go for us, but we have full confidence we'll be able to still have really great, robust conversations. So invitations to interview, that'll happen probably sometime next week. You will need to be invited to interview. It is possible to not be invited to interview and still remain under consideration for the class, but anybody who is admitted and eventually enrolled in the program will have to have an interview. Our interviews are pretty robust. They are conducted not only by myself and my team, by our alumni and our faculty as well. So regardless of format, you're in for a really robust interview experience at Yale SOM. Again, it is required for admission, and at this point, we're working on the options to do this via Zoom. With all of these options and all these people who are excited and eager to meet you, it's going to be a bit of a jigsaw puzzle to put this all together. We're going to do our best to accommodate sort of back-to-back interviews. There is a required group interview. That'll be interesting. We feel really confident in our faculty members' ability to successfully manage and facilitate that. Our faculty teach online all the time, so we're feeling pretty good about that. Interview days are here. We're probably not going to change these days, but really willing to accommodate folks who simply can't make it happen for work or family purposes. But we will have sort of expect you to be able to carve out some time for interviews. If we have to accommodate you on different days, let us know. We certainly can do that. Should we decide we need to go to other days, additional days, we may do that as well. I'd say for right now, do put those in the back of your mind as potential days to interview once your application is complete and then evaluated by our team. In terms of the actual interview itself, don't change anything that you might have done if you had come to campus. Dress professionally, be on time, come prepared, ask great questions, go through your application, be ready to answer questions about your essays, your resume, your work experience, and your intention and motivations for the program. When you get in front of an alum, be prepared to go beyond that and talk about your value as a community member. Make sure you follow up. We're happy to answer questions via email, but a thank you note can also go a really long way. All right, Wendy,
So,
I can see we've got some great questions here, but go
yes.
ahead.
Well, I was going to say we have a lot of questions. So
Yep.
how about if I lob them over to you?
Sounds good. No
All
pressure,
right.
okay.
Yeah, put you on the spot. No.
Great, I'm ready.
But so what if someone is not able to get their transcript in an official transcript because their alma mater is their registrar's office is closed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I don't know if you said official or unofficial, so I'll answer both. Yeah, unofficial ones are fine. Again, you might have one lying around maybe you have your official copy of your transcript. Go ahead and make a copy of that, scan it, take a picture. Anything that allows us to be able to see your courses, your grades, and very importantly, the fact that you graduated from college or from your graduate degree program is really important. I think we'd have a bit of a tough time if we weren't able to see something that indicated your performance in your undergraduate or graduate experience. But again, unofficial is okay. Unofficial doesn't really mean a scribbled piece of paper with what you can best remember, but I'm hopeful that you'll be able to access that either in your own archived files or by going online to your alumni website of your alma mater and seeing if the SIS option is there to download your own copy of your transcript. That's usually true for most, I'd say, like big schools, US schools. That might be a little bit more difficult for international programs. We totally understand. We'll do our very best to work with you. All of this gets verified prior to your enrollment. So at the very least, whatever you give us is gonna need to match up before I think you'd be invited to actually join the program. Again, given that we know that things are quite difficult right now. We'll do our very best to work with you, but it's important for us to understand your performance in your undergraduate and graduate degrees.
Is it possible to be invited to an interview without an EA score?
Yep, yeah, it is. Again, I think just the situation we all find ourselves in requires us to be this flexible and this accommodating. It also really points to the holistic nature of our application process. A score is never going to be the thing that allows for easy admission to the program. It's also never going to be the thing that prevents anybody from being admitted. While a low test score is oftentimes a bit concerning as it can indicate a potential or lack of readiness for the program, it's never the only thing. And so our holistic process really allows us to put these pieces together to eventually answer the question, is this person ready to be here? And are we setting them up for success because we've seen a pattern of past success and we know that the student is going to be a great match for this program? All of these pieces really matter. In light of the current circumstances, the short answer is yes, but I will ask you to start moving forward, planning to take a remote online proctored exam probably by the end of April, early May. If things go a little haywire beyond that, if test centers fail to open, again, I think we'll be as accommodating and flexible as we possibly can and move through the process. I think the thing that will probably trip folks up is that we may not be able to meet that April 23rd deadline that I had on the last slide to give you your final admissions decision. And that's going to be a little challenging, I think, for folks. We're all going to work together and do the very best we can.
What about interview dates? If invited to the next round, would you have to save both days for interview? Would you be interviewing on both days?
Good question. The answer is maybe. And the reason that I say that is because the group interview is such an important component, and it really is going to rely on faculty availability, and we're working that out as we speak. Normally, regardless of which day you were to come to campus, nobody would ever have to come to both days. You would have the same experience on Friday that you would on Saturday. If our current circumstances dictate that group interviews just need to happen on Saturday, we may ask you to interview individually on Friday and with a group on Saturday. Might be vice versa. We might have 2 days of group interviews. I'm just not quite sure yet. So please hang in there, but the short answer is no, you don't have to interview on both days. You'll do one or the other unless we decide to only have 1 day of group interviews. And hopefully that'll be able to be, that's accessible to everybody. If not, we sort of probably foresee that we'll be doing this maybe one more time. The point here is that it's important for us to have that group discussion, that group interview. So bear with us while we start to figure this out. We'll certainly let you know when you've been invited to interview what all of those options are.
And can you just remind us when we will notify candidates about the interview, whether or not they've been selected for interview?
So we're, doing exactly what you think we're doing, which is reading applications. We'd be doing that if we weren't quarantined at home. Well, we'd be quarantined at home because we'd be reading at home. This is a pretty important week for us as applications, came in yesterday and will continue to trickle in over the next week or so. So yeah, usually we take about a week to read all the applications that come in. The committee will meet early next week and the decisions to interview will be released shortly after. So I think you probably can expect to hear from us mid next week at the very latest about saving some time on the 16th or 17th or the 16th and 17th, depending on that group interview schedule. So yeah, hang tight. That should be the time when you would hear from us about interview possibility.
And is the final decision date for round 3 application and waitlist applicants still April 23rd?
Kind of. I think for anybody who has a full application that we are able to read, interview, and has all the components for us to comfortably and confidently make a final admissions decision, we will still stick to that day. For those for whom we may be waiting for elements of the application to still roll in, most obviously and likely the test, that date will not probably be the day that you will hear from us. Again, it's still important to us to maintain integrity in our admissions process to require that test score. And so if you end up with an online test date of May 1st or May 7th, we'll reevaluate your application again and then do our best to expedite a decision so you're not waiting forever to hear back from us.
Okay. What does the outlook for the class size look like for this year?
I mean, Wendy, I'd love to hear you back me up on this, and I think you will, but it's funny, as many changes as we've had to make to accommodate applications, to accommodate the current class, we're kind of going forward as if, right? As if we will have sort of return to normal, I guess. And so we absolutely expect to enroll a class of 75 students like we did last year. So the target for the class size has not changed. We still have 3 areas of focus. We still hope for gender parity. We still hope for a full cohort of 75 students. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I think we're on track for that. So we're looking forward to having a full class.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's see.
Great questions. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. We have about 10 minutes, so we can definitely take some more. And if you don't have any, that's okay too. And we may have gone through them all. So, and we definitely have some key pieces of advice that we can offer. So if you don't have any questions, that's totally fine. I do see a question about expected EA scores.
Yes.
Or maybe what we're sort of hoping to see. We're talking a lot about the EA tonight. We've been talking a lot about the EA for the last 2.5 years. So again, if you're sort of new to this or new to the EA, we're so excited by this option. It's significantly shorter and requires significantly less prep time from our candidates. So we've been through this now for almost 3 cycles, and last year's class, the first year class currently, it was an enormous portion of the group that actually submitted their EA score as a required part of the application. And so we're seeing just more and more excitement about this exam. We're seeing more refinement from the exam itself. Long story short, there have been quite a few studies done by GMAC to really make sure that this was a thing that felt good. And these are validity studies. Does this do what it says it's going to do? So over the last several years, although most schools have only been taking, including us, the exam for a couple of years, this exam has existed for a long time. And we just actually went through another webinar with GMAC on updates to the EA, and the answer remains the same. So the big reveal is a 150 is about average and seems to indicate success in the program. So that's about what we hope to see from our candidates. We think that that feels good for us. We have yet to do our own validity study, but we feel really good about what's out there in the literature and our peer institutions who have been doing this for a long time as well. There are subsections of the test. We'll hope to see a 10 on each of the subsections. If one of them is particularly challenging for you, sometimes that's the quantitative section. We might suggest doing something like MBA math or taking a Coursera on accounting, economics, statistics. You might want to do that anyway, just to get ready for the program. But if you find yourself sort of struggling in one particular area, there are great resources out there to help shore up any weak areas.
So how old of a test score will we take?
Great question. 5 years, and that's not us. That's the test agencies saying that's about what we think makes sense for validity based on how many people take the test year over year. If you have an old test score, unfortunately for admission at this time, that's not going to be valid for our purposes. If you want to share that with us as an indication of your ability for success, you're welcome to do. Honestly, it doesn't probably really matter, but if it's something you think you want to share with us in some capacity, you're welcome to do that. We're still going to need a valid score for admission.
I have a more technical question around the EA. Jason completed the EA, but it shows application status saying that it's waiting for an EA score report.
No problem. Yeah, no problem. EA score reports are tricky things. We do get those from the testing agencies. Occasionally they go haywire and they end up at, the public health school, or they end up over across the street at the environmental school. So just shoot us an email at emba.admissions@yale.edu. Our staff can actually go into the magical place of EA test scores, extract that score from the system, make it official in our system, and instead of a red X, you'll see a green check mark. So best to individually follow up with us on that. I have one more. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. If someone has a CPA or a CFA or any other degree, does the quant score matter less?
Not necessarily, but certainly gives us more confidence about your quantitative abilities. We certainly know, I have my own stories of horror taking standardized tests for grad school, and I know that sometimes it just doesn't all click. And so, yeah, if you think that you took that test and man, it just didn't quite go the way you were expecting to, and you have certifications that would otherwise indicate a strong prowess for quant, sure, and that can definitely give the committee confidence, as would something like a Coursera, an online course, or mbamath.com. All of those things are really you saying, hey, I know I can do better than this, and I have the chops to be here. Again, all of this is towards setting you up for success. The program is rigorous, it's fast-paced, and so having that language, that vocabulary, seeing those numbers not look quite so foreign anymore, we really want you to start off on a strong foot. We do offer a pre-MBA math course. Right now, we're planning to do that in person in June. If we need to move to a remote option, that may be a possibility as well. But this is required for some, optional for everybody. So if you feel like you could use a little bit of a brush up, that's available.
I also have a question here about how common is it to have new mothers in the program?
More common than you'd think. Not new mothers, new fathers too, new parents. So we've definitely had that happen. Gosh, I mean, in my couple of years here, I guess I can think of at least 4 or 5, lots of baby showers, lots. I'm
Yeah.
like rattling them off in my head. Quite a few. It is not uncommon at all. And certainly there's support in the program from other parents, other classmates, partners, grandparents. So yeah, it's not uncommon at all. It's actually, I'd say, fairly common. New mothers and not old parents, existing parents. I would say it feels like when we have our picnic in July in the second week in residence, and we encourage families to come, feels like we see just as many spouses and kiddos as we
Yeah.
do students. So we're really a family-oriented community here, and so we really encourage you to make your family, your tribe, your people part of this experience with you.
Yeah, and we have mothers, new mothers in the program who have become mothers while they're in the program.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it is obviously always a challenge to sort of balance the family and work and life in general, and school.
Yeah.
But it's definitely doable. And as Joanne said, you absolutely need to have a support system in place, but absolutely
Great.
doable.
Great.
Yeah.
So we have like 3 more minutes left. I'm gonna just pop over to the next slide because Wendy and I have both been at this for a really long time. And I think at this point, we've got some really good advice for our applicants. Wendy, if you had one piece of advice to give to anybody, what would you say you would tell folks to do?
Yeah, I'd say, be patient and flexible. Our amazing admissions team is here. We're all here, even though we're working remotely, but we are available to answer any questions that you may have. But also, things are changing. We're in a time of uncertainty. And so, it's important to be nimble and flexible as we sort of, figure this out all together. So what about you, Joanne?
I couldn't have said that any better. I think similarly, be ready. If this comes to pass and it all works out and we kind of go back to somewhat state of normalcy here, we expect you to come. We expect you to be ready. We expect you to engage. So while this is our final round, and you may not find out about us, a decision from us quite when you had hoped, things might happen at an accelerated pace on an accelerated timeline. I encourage you to be ready for any possibility, including enrolling in the class in just a few short months. So do what you have to do, and start to set up your sort of time management tool set, and start to gather people together to get them ready to support you through this program. So I would say, I'm kind of in my head like a runner on the blocks. Be ready to blast off any second. Because the time to prepare to be in the program, particularly if you're going to get a decision quite a bit later, is definitely on the accelerated side. Many of you who are on the call have been in touch with somebody on our team, myself, Wendy, David, Liz, Maria. We are all here. I don't think any of us is sitting around with nothing to do, but we are still available, even though we're not in the office. Please reach out if you have questions. I'm actually going to pop over to the final slide with our admissions email. If you need to set up some individual time with any of us, Maria is chatting with me now and saying, please let people know that I'm happy to set up time to talk about individual situations, particularly as it might relate to a later application or an incomplete application. We're here for you, so please don't hesitate. If you don't reach out, we don't know, but if you do reach out, we're happy to set up calls, Zooms. Unfortunately, no longer in person. We used to do that quite a bit, so we're definitely missing seeing you guys in person, but we're really, really happy to accommodate you as we all are at home and virtually. I think we're all set.
Yeah, so with that, have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us. And we really look forward to reading your applications.
Yep. Thank you guys. Great to see everybody virtually.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.